All right. So I want to welcome you all this morning. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your patience. We had a little glitch with the link this morning, but I'm glad to see everybody figured it out and we're getting our folks to come on. I want to welcome you to our session on Social Security, Unraveling the Mystery. And we all know what a mystery Social Security can be. We're really appreciative of the Mays Family Foundation, who helps us to bring these sessions to you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We're keeping everybody muted, and also we're keeping the video off just to help with the recording of the session. And that being said, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box. I'll be monitoring those, and after Lisa's presentation, we'll address some of those questions. And as I said, we are recording the session, so just be aware of that, and we just ask you not to disclose any information that might be private. We do need to adhere to the HIPAA standards. Also, just in a follow-up, we're going to be sending the link to the recording. So please look for that. We'll also send Lisa's PowerPoint presentation. So just keep an eye out for that. So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa. She has a long history in the social services realm. I refer a lot of families to Lisa. Lisa works for the Packard Law Firm. She has history working with Social Security, so she is a wealth of information. She's been with the Packard Law Firm for over a year, and started working for Project Caridad at the beginning of this year. And Project Caridad is a nonprofit part, and Lisa, you can tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but it's a nonprofit part of the Packard Law Firm, providing pro bono support to families when they're applying for Social Security. So that being said, again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that, and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. With that being said, I'll go ahead and turn over the presentation to Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thanks. Good morning. You got it right, Heather. So Packard Law Firm has a Social Security Disability Department and personal injury and a few other things. We also have an attorney, Allison Packard, who does and that kind of thing, wills and that kind of thing. And she works with a lot of families with people who are disabled to set up trusts so that like money can be left to adult children, but have it not like affect their benefits. So, and then several years ago, the Packard firm developed this or started Project Caridad. And that is a program. I do a lot of education, information referral, that kind of thing, but we can offer some pro bono services for people with who are having an issue with the Social Security disability process. Through that, we do also then sometimes open those cases and take those cases on. But my primary job here is a Social Security intake worker. So there's 4 of us. We do all of the phone screenings. And then if in fact it's a case that we can take, then we do the filings, that kind of thing. And then there's a team of 4 case managers who then act as the ongoing contact. And then we have 3 or 4 attorneys that do the hearings, and 2 full-time medical records staff for that. So that being said, I'm gonna just kind of, not in detail, and the PowerPoint is really just kind of a little bit of a framework, but go over some about Social Security, SSI, the process, and then some hints, and then really interested in the questions. So there we go. Okay. Okay. So there's two kinds of Social Security disability. There's SSI, or supplemental security income, and there's Social Security disability. Now, Social Security disability is based on what you've worked and paid into the system. And that's through Social Security, not through just the basic income tax. So some people think they may be a private contractor, self-employed, they have been paying their taxes, but they may not necessarily be paying into the Social Security system. So you have to, unless you're very young, you have to have paid into the system 5 of the prior 10 years or 20 of the prior 40 quarters in order to be potentially eligible for Social Security disability. So it's based on what you've worked and paid into the system. Supplemental security income is what most of the children's benefits are. And it is for people who maybe haven't worked and paid into the system, usually haven't worked and paid into the system all of that time. Or if they did just a little bit. And so they may get a benefit, but it'll be a very small benefit. They both have the same medical criteria. So the medical disability criteria is the same, but for SSI, or supplemental security income, you also have to be very low income and resources. So that's when we're talking about children, a lot of times it may be a child who would medically qualify, but because of the family household income and resources, they don't technically qualify. So that's kind of a big part of SSI, is that you also have to be very low income and resources, and then you have to stay that way. And so there's a lot of additional reporting as far as providing Social Security with ongoing financial statements about, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, that kind of thing. Okay. So in order, the basic adult definition of Social Security disability is to have a medically determinable impairment that prevents substantial gainful activity for at least a year. Either it has been a year, or it's projected to be a year, or it's expected to end in death. So what you're looking at is not, and a lot of it has to do with how the illness affects your ability to function. That's the big part. So if for adults, it's how it prevents you from doing work. For children, a lot of it is how it affects their ability to work in schools or to handle schools. So very few diagnoses standalone will qualify for you for Social Security disability. It's usually, yes, there's these diagnoses, but this is how they manifest themselves in this particular person. So one example I like to give is 2 people can have diabetes. One of them may be insulin dependent on dialysis and have had amputations. Another one just has to watch their diet. So they both have the same diagnosis, but so much of it is about how it affects their ability to function. For children, it's got to have severe limitations. And it can't just be, well, they have asthma and they have to take medicine. It's how they do even with that treatment. There are some medical conditions that require treatment compliance. Okay. So I kind of already hit this one already. So the most a person can get right now in SSI is $783. Now, often there's other offsets for where they may not get that full benefit, but right now $783 is the max. For a single person, for an adult, you can have a place to live and 1 vehicle. And any income and resources over that has to be less than $2,000. And then for a couple, it's $1,175 and $3,000. And basically they looked at earned and unearned income. So there is some stuff for wages, but basically it's any kind of benefits coming into the house, anything that is cash or could be turned into cash. Like you can have a burial policy as long as it's irrevocable. So you can't go and cash that out, because if you can cash it out, then it's the same as having the money in your pocket. There's lots of kind of issues involved with SSI. I talked a little bit about special needs trusts. So there are ways, if somebody has excess income and resources, depending on what those are, to set those up in a trust that then those funds can only be used for certain things that are for the person's care. If one thing that gets people in trouble sometimes is that they may have an extra car or a piece of property or something, and they will just transfer it to somebody else, like the title of a car to another person, take money out of an account and put somebody else's name on it, and say, well, I don't have that now. If you sell anything like a car or something like that, you have to get a fair market value for it. You can't sell a car to your next door neighbor or your mom or whatever for $5 to kind of keep it off the banks. They'll look back at recent transfers of deeds or titles or, bank account totals. And if something has gone away, you're not reporting, oh, that's not mine anymore, and you can't show that you got fair market value and you spent the money and how you spent the money or something like that, they will count it as your resource for 5 years. So you really can't, they're pretty good at finding that stuff. So you really can't hide that stuff. And if you get awarded and then they find it later, they'll stop your benefits and come after you for the money you've gotten. So same with life insurance policies. They have to be irrevocable. If there's a cash value to it, then it counts. So as far as for Social Security disability, the amount you get is based on what's been worked and paid into the system. From the date that your disability is found to have started, not the date you applied or the date they made the decision, but from the date they find that your disability started, 2 years after that date, you will become eligible for Medicare. With SSI, Medicaid comes with it automatically. And if you get even $1 of SSI, you get full Medicaid. And for a lot of people, the insurance benefit is more important than the cash benefit. And then for Social Security disability, they will back pay you to the date of disability, but they'll only go back 1 year from when you applied. So if you've been disabled for 5 years, you went ahead and applied now, they approved you back that 5 years, they'll only give you 1 year of back pay. For SSI, the potential payments start the month after filing. It doesn't matter what date, if they found you disabled at birth, it's the month after filing that your payments would start. There are incentives to working when you're on Social Security disability or SSI. For Social Security disability, you can work and make more than what they consider substantial gainful activity, which right now is $1,263. So if somebody is working and making $1,263, even if they're just working part-time, that is considered substantial gainful activity. And you've got to already not be working or not already have that income in order to apply. You can't, lots of people think, well, I'm going to apply and see if I get it. and then I'll quit my job. It doesn't work that way. As long as you are still working and making that amount of money, you cannot qualify. You can't even, they won't even take the application, they'll reject it. But if you can work less than that in some ways. Now, you have to kind of walk that line because they'll do periodic medical reviews. And if you're working right under that amount, they're going to think, well, could you just push yourself a little bit more and make it? For Social Security disability, if you are able to, there is an awareness through Social Security that some people's disabilities, they can get employment, but they can't maintain or sustain that employment. So they may be able to work a month or two and then they stop and then they get a job later. For Social Security disability, they have what they call a 9-month trial work program that allows you to work and make over that 1263 a month and keep your Social Security disability benefits, the cash benefit. Now, that is not 9 consecutive months, it's 9 total months. So if you do 1 here and a couple there and that kind of stuff. After that, they will stop your benefits, but if you stop working, being able to work, you can get those benefits restarted. For SSI, they forgive if you're getting just SSI, they forgive the first $85, and then for every $2 you earn, they deduct $1 from the SSI. So technically, you can qualify if you're working and making under $1263 a month. What we know from our experience is if you're working more than 20 hours a week or making more than about $500 a month gross, the chances of you being disabled, found disabled, are very low. So that's kind of unless there's a specific circumstance, that's one of the things that we kind of screen for and talk to people about. There are some additional allowance if it's somehow subsidized work. So it's not like in a competitive employment. If it's like we used to call them sheltered workshop, if you have a job coach, if you got the job or are able to keep the job with different allowances than just Joe Schmo coming off the street would get, we keep you in one area, we limit the tasks you do, you get more breaks, you get more flexibility with when you come in or not, that kind of thing. Then sometimes there's justifications that can be made that it's not really competitive employment. So for Social Security disability, there is a lot about your past work. So once they have done their evaluation medically and determined what your limitations are, the first thing they're going to do is there any of your past work for the last 15 years that you could still do with those limitations? If there are, then you're not disabled as far as Social Security is concerned. And it really, the allowances go up with your age. So if you are over 50 or specifically over 55, they really look at whether you can just do your past work, not whether there's any work you can do or if there's some transferable skills to another job. An example would be, I'm 30 years old, I'm a construction worker, I hurt my back, I can't work construction anymore. Well, it's reasonable to think a 30-year-old could retrain and learn to do something different. Whereas if I'm 60 and that happens, it's not as reasonable to expect that person could retrain to get into a whole new career and start. So it's the older you are, the easier it is. And then, so I talked about 5 of the last 10 years for work. There are some shortened durations for that depending upon age if someone is under 31. So for the basic screening, it's Are you working? Is your condition severe? Um, and looking at that work. And if the symptoms that you're reporting could reasonably be caused by those diagnoses that you have. There are some additional benefits for Social Security, not for SSI. There are spouses benefits, there are children's benefits, and then something that particularly I think the people with children who have intellectual disabilities, there is a benefit called disabled adult child benefits. And this is really why it's important that maybe you have a child who is under 18 but does not qualify for SSI because of the parent's income and resources. Once they turn 18, maybe you've got insurance for them. Maybe monetarily you're doing okay, so you really don't feel like you need that benefit. You really want to have them evaluated and try to get a disability started before age 22 or established by Social Security. So if you were found disabled before age 22 and you have a parent who is deceased, retired, or disabled, then that disabled adult child could get benefits on the parent's record. So for most people, it's based on what you yourself have worked and paid into the system. In this case, it is when it's been a developmental disability and you were found disabled before age 22, you have a parent who's deceased, retired, or disabled, then you can get benefits on that record. And the amount of benefits you get is dependent upon how many people are being paid on that record and how much that parent paid into the Social Security system. Now, it's not that the determination by Social Security has to be happened before age 22. It's that the disability, they're able to go in and determine that the disability started before age 22. So it is possible later in life to try to do that. It's just a lot harder. The main thing they look for with developmental issues is school records. Well, most schools keep those records available for about 7 years. So if you're trying to get a disability based on a developmental type of condition, then you really want to be able to do it within that time that they can get school records. Maybe there's still teachers around that could do reports, that kind of thing. Social Security disability right now, the most you can get is $3,011 a month. And again, you become eligible for Medicare after 2 years. Now, at that point, there will be, they'll offer you the Medicare, and there is a premium for the Medicare. I think it's about $134.99 right now, which would be then deducted from that check. I can't imagine a situation where I would recommend somebody not take the Medicare, because it is possible to get it later during open enrollment, but the premiums are substantially more. So even if you've got other insurance and that kind of stuff, it's really important to get the Medicare because it's, who knows what's going to happen later, and that's a good benefit. And then a lot of people get really, like, they may have an adult child who's on SSI, and then the parent retires, and then the child becomes eligible for disabled adult child benefits. They call it DAC. So the child becomes eligible for disabled adult child benefits, and the benefit amount is such that they lose their SSI, which then means they lose their Medicaid, which if you're in a waiver program or anything like that, you got to have Medicaid. People kind of freak out at that. But it is possible, and they want to try to turn it down. No, I don't want them to have the DAC benefits. I want to keep the SSI. You can't choose that. SSI always has to be the payer of last resort. So if there's any other benefit you're potentially eligible for, you've got to pursue that. There is, I think I think the military kind of equivalent, I think they call it an incapacitated adult child, but if there's a parent who's retired from the military, they may also, as far as SSI, show that make you show that you've applied for any military benefits that that child, either adult or whatever, can get. And if you don't, they'll stop the SSI. But if someone's in waivers, that kind of thing, you can usually get Medicaid through the state, through Health and Human Services, to get that. So you don't get the SSI back, but you get the Medicaid back. The Medicaid is just coming from the state. It's not attached to the SSI check. Okay, so this is a basic timeline about how long the process usually takes. Now, we're just about 6 months into this COVID thing. We're not sure how much it's going to affect this processing time. You know, the Social Security system and disability determination services have continued to work, but the caseloads and the types of claims they're getting are different. So when you apply for Social Security disability, the local Social Security office decides your technical eligibility. So for SSI, they'll screen for income and resources. For Social Security disability, they'll screen for whether you've got your quarters. And then they send the claim to Disability Determination Services in Austin. That is a state agency, but it's completely federally run and funded. So each DDS in each state is supposed to operate the same. So the claim goes, once the Social Security office has determined that the person is technically eligible, then the claim goes to Disability Determination Services, and they determine the medical eligibility. So they're the ones that request the records and do that evaluation and that kind of thing. So that's kind of these timelines that we're looking at. I know that they were shut down for a short period of time because too many people in the building got COVID. That's where I used to work. So I've kind of kept in touch with some of those people. Social Security is still open, but they've closed their doors. Everything is by phone and mail at this point. But these are basic timelines. One of the biggest things affecting processing time at this point is the access to medical records. So when DDS is requesting records from the doctors, are the doctors open and sending those records? And then if DDS is unable to get enough functional information from the medical records, usually they would send people out to one of their doctors for a consultative exam. Well, those doctors aren't seeing people right now. So for a while these cases were just kind of sitting. I've heard now that they're doing some consultative exam stuff by phone. So I really don't know how the COVID stuff is going to affect timeframes. Here in Bexar County, it's usually about 8 months from the reconsideration denial to the hearing with the administrative law judge. So the process is you apply, they make an initial determination. If you're approved, great. If you're denied, then you can file a first appeal, which is that reconsideration. In that case, you're going to provide them with information about any additional treatment that you've gotten or diagnoses or evaluations. And they're also supposed to try to get records if there were some things that they were unable to get before. A different disability examiner looks at the case, a different doctor has to review it. If you're approved at that point, great. If you're denied, then you can file for a hearing in front of an administrative law judge. That usually takes about 8 months for that step. And that is the step where even if I was applying for disability, you can do all of this process on your own. You don't have to get an attorney. My strong suggestion, even before I started working for an attorney that does that, is that you really want an attorney if you get to that administrative law judge step. It used to be you would actually appear either in person or through video conference with the judge. There's a judge, there's a court reporter, there's there's your attorney, and then sometimes there'll be a vocational expert or something like that there. But it's not an open to the public thing. People can't wander in and out and see what's going on. So it is a private issue. If you are denied at the ALJ, Administrative Law Judge hearing, you can do what's called an appeals council appeal. Basically, there's a council that reviews the administrative law judge's decision and decides if there was an error on the face of the evidence. The biggest thing for that is unless and that step usually takes about a year, but unless there was records that the Social Security failed to get, you can't present new evidence, basically, and they don't consider treatment you get between the time you had your hearing and the time the appeals council gets ready to review. They're really just looking at what the judge did and if there was an error on the face of the evidence. Now, if there is an error that they find, they may remand that case back to the administrative law judge to address the error. That only happens in about 10% of the cases, and that doesn't mean that error changes it from a denial to an allowance. So it's a smaller percentage of that. If the case is remanded back to the administrative law judge, it goes back to the same judge who saw the case initially. If you stop at the appeals council, you can try to do an appeal to a district court. There are only certain, you can go pro se and, just submit stuff on your own. There's only certain attorneys that do those district court appeals, and they look at the administrative law judge and the appeals council decisions, and then they decide if it's a case they want to take or not. We don't do those, but we refer out for those. And so through all this whole process, you can withdraw your claim, but you can't have two claims going at the same time. So you can't be at the administrative law judge and then start a new claim. Once you go on to the appeals, to the district court, you can file a new claim. Okay. So there are a few ways. So number 3 is not applicable right now. You can't go to, well, if you go to the Social Security office, they're not going to let you in. So if you want to apply, you can apply online. The 1-800-772-1213 is the national number. You can also contact the local number directly. Online, to try to apply online, you do have to get a login and your that type of thing. So this is the part that if we're taking a case, we do. Some people come to us from the beginning to help them file. Others, if once they get denied, they file. But then we do the online filings and all that kind of thing. Okay. When you file online, there is a question. It's automatically doing a Social Security application. If it's an adult, if it's a child, there's a separate filing. If it's for an adult, there's a question that says, do you want to apply for SSI? And you want to make sure you check yes if you're potentially eligible for SSI. There's an additional application or information that you have to get for that, and it's not available online, but the Social Security Administration should contact you to get that additional information if you check the box. So it's really important if you're trying to get SSI for someone, or you think you might be eligible for SSI, that you check that box. Let me look, I'm going to look at a couple of the questions that I got earlier, and then we'll take questions. So how do I even start? So you start either by consulting an attorney for them to help you, or you get online and you do the application. It's not a complicated process. I mean, the application is pretty straightforward. The main things besides demographic information that you have to have are information about all the doctors or treating sources that you've seen. They're going to want approximate dates, first appointment, last appointment, next appointment. They're going to want addresses, phone numbers, that kind of thing. And then if you've got a work history, they want work for the past 15 years. That's part of that can you do your past work or not thing. So online, you can call Social Security to set up a phone interview to take the application, or you can hire somebody to do it for you. Okay. And the how do I hold on to my current doctors part of that question is really just going to be dependent upon what medical coverage you end up getting. If you get Medicaid and your doctors take Medicaid, that's great. If you get Medicare and the doctors take the Medicare, that's great. If the doctors don't take those things, then the only way to do it would be out of pocket. There is no way that the next question was just interested in knowing, is there a workaround SSI disability funding without using parents' income to qualify? If the child is under 18 and they're living with the parent, one parent, both parents, whatever, there's no way around that. Once the child turns 18, then they don't count the parents' income and resources. Now, if the child is then living rent-free, they will deduct some amount from their SSI. It's called a food and shelter contribution. So any gifts of money or value that are being provided to someone who is potentially eligible for SSI kind of counts for income and resources. Now they used to figure out if there's 4 people in the house, then they should be paying 25%. Whatever that 25% is, once we look at the bills, we're going to deduct that from their SSI. Now it's about a $250 deduction. Now people say, well, how can I charge them rent if they don't have any money? Well, once they start getting a benefit and you can start having them pay some of that benefit toward the bills and then show them over time that that's happening, then there are ways to get that amount of benefit increased. Okay. Do qualifications for SSI and SSDI include physical and or mental? Yes, yes. So they look at everything. So it's important to list everything, even if you feel like there's one thing that's really the reason why you're disabled, but you also have high blood pressure, you may have a speech problem, decreased hearing, that kind of thing. Because like I said, most of the things there are not that many things that make you an automatic allowance because of the diagnosis. It's how you function. So each of those things may mean functionally I'm somewhat limited. So there's other jobs. So if we look at this impairment, it means I can't do these things. So we're taking those jobs out of the mix. If we look at this additional impairment, oh, that means I can't do those things. We take those jobs out of the mix. For an adult, you're wanting to get, so there's really nothing left that you could do. How are applications being handled through COVID? Online and by phone and by mail. If you mail anything to Social Security, give them anything, keep a copy, and if you mail it certified, because stuff disappears. What specific
Lisa,
language?
I have a question for you on that. Do you recommend starting a computer application or a phone call application? What do you think is the best way for a family to start that?
I think it's better if you have the ability to do it online, that you do it online, because it'll be quicker and there's an electronic proof of when things happen. And the application itself, as long as you've got some abilities in that way, the application itself is it's a little tedious, but the process isn't that difficult. And then they'll send you additional forms like releases to sign, um, and and then they'll have you review the application to see if it's correct, and then you sign it and send it back, that kind of thing. But if you can do it online, I think it's best to do it online. And if you want to just go right with an attorney, and there's an attorney who will take you, then the attorney will do all that.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions on the
Yeah, a couple of more.
on your list? Okay, and then I'll go over a few too.
Okay, what specific language is needed to write a successful application? It's really, one of the things is so much programming is strength-based. So you're talking about what the person is able to do, not what they're not able to do. This is the place to talk about how they are functionally. You want to list the diagnoses, but then you want to get as much detail as possible into how that affects their day-to-day. Like if it's personal needs things and they won't shower unless they're prompted, they can't handle money, they can't, medications have to be supervised, you know, just as much detail as possible. They will send out, so you'll give them the basic information, and then whether it's an adult or a child, they'll send out a function report. That is your chance to specifically draw a picture of how the medical conditions affect their ability to function. And so it's the same form whether you have a bad back, or you've had a stroke, or you have an intellectual disability. It's going through all kinds of things during the day and putting what the person can do and what the person can't do. They won't consider things like, well, I don't have any transportation. That's not something they'll do. Let's see. What, if anything, is done or can be done for two individuals with disability who want to get married, but both do not have required history for SSDI? And so I believe so basically if there's a decreased amount that a married couple can get than a single person. If you get married, or actually if you're living together, then it may be that if one person gets Social Security disability, it may make the other person ineligible for SSI. To be honest, I don't know how much lobbying is happening around that, but there's no real workaround for that. Says, I have an appeal my son case from the judge and still have not heard anything. Should I reapply and start over? I'm so confused and need help. Oh, I can call that person, or she can give me a call. You can always call Social Security to find out the status of the case. If it's still pending, you don't want to start over, because once a decision has been made through a period of time, you can't go back and appeal past that time. So if you still got a case pending, you really want to keep that case going, because you want to keep that onset date. Otherwise, you lose all benefits up to when you apply again. How do I apply for SSI granddaughter with autism? If you have custody of the granddaughter, then they're going to go by, for a child, they're going to, for the most part, go by the grandparents' income and resources. That is one of those situations. I was talking with Heather earlier. There is an organization called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, and they really have the lowdown on the ways to get through the system that way. But they will look at the grandparents' income and resources that will affect whether that grandchild is eligible for SSI. They're going to look at legal guardians and conservatorships if it's a minor. If the person is an adult, even if you have a power of attorney, the individual filing is going to have to sign stuff unless it's a guardianship. Social Security really doesn't do much of anything with the power of attorney unless someone has had a stroke or something, as in a coma, or you have something like that. But other than that, lots of people have powers of attorney for disabled adult children. Um, they will, the, the client, the person applying, or for whom the application is being completed will have to sign up on the applications. That's all the questions I had.
Okay, all right. So we have a couple of questions
Okay.
about SSI. Well, the first question, SSI, if it's a family and it's a child that you're applying for a child, do they look at the household income and
Yes,
resources?
they look at household income and the number of people in the home.
Okay.
So it makes a difference if there's one child or 5 children. And one thing I didn't hit otherwise is as far as child support is returned, there's child support being paid for a child, Social Security will not count 30% of the child support, and then that other 70% would be deducted from the amount of SSI that the person can get. So for a child, there is a 30% allowance on the child support. Once the person turns 18, it's counted dollar for dollar.
Okay, and let me ask a question just off of that. Is there a way for, in terms of that child support, when there's an adult or a child, is there a way that families can direct that into a different account to where Social Security will not look at it like a special needs trust or an ABLE?
Well, a special needs trust, it would have to be an ABLE account or a special needs trust. And there's some ways for other people with maybe too much income and resources to apply for Medicaid through the state, maybe if they get a private pension and Social Security or whatever, and they combine 2 amounts of that is too high, there is a way for one of those payments to be directed through a trust kind of thing also. But you want to make sure you get with someone to set up that trust that knows what they're doing as far as this is concerned, because it has to be a specific type of special needs trust, and not all, and lots of people think they've gotten that set up right, and then you give all the trust documents to Social Security and find out it doesn't meet their legal guidelines.
Okay, can you talk about what PASS stands for? PASS, the acronym PASS.
PASS program is, I'm not that familiar with that, to be honest. But it is a program that helps with work for people who are disabled, and I believe it is specifically for people with developmental issues. But I don't know that. I could get that information.
Okay.
I just haven't worked with that in a while, and I'm not.
If you could, that would be great, and we could, in our follow-up email, we could put that information in there.
Okay.
Along with the grandparents raising grandchildren. We'll send that information as well. Okay, here's a question. For the appeal after the first denial, is it recommended to have an attorney already or advocate? Because one of the questions asks for the person's name. So for the appeal after the first denial, it is recommended to have an attorney already or advocate, because I guess in part of the application it asks for the person's name.
Yeah, yeah.
But you should have that established prior.
Application, it's going to ask if there is a representative in any way. It really just depends on what you want to do. But if you apply and then get a representative, the representative will submit paperwork to Social Security so that they get on the record as that representative and then can be involved in the case. I would probably, if it was me, probably go ahead and get the representative first and have them do the filing to make sure that the filing is as thorough and accurate as possible. Because if certain things are being omitted or reported incorrectly, then that could be part of what's going on with why it's not being approved.
All right. As a 100% vet, and I am an employable vet, can I receive SSI benefits also now?
Not SSI, you could potentially get Social Security disability. So for SSI, supplemental security income, any kind of VA disability is probably going to kick you out. If you're 100% for sure, you're going to just be making too much money. But for Social Security disability, yes, you still have to have worked and paid into the Social Security system 5 of the last 10 years from the date you became disabled. But yes, you can. You can double dip. You can get Social Security disability and the VA benefits. When we're doing the initial and the reconsideration for 100% disabled vets, whether we're doing the filing or somebody's doing it themselves, you can request critical claim status and expedited processing for a veteran case, and they are supposed to kind of put them at the top of the pile. Once you get to the hearing, it doesn't really affect anything. And one thing people don't understand a lot is, you know, how can Social Security say I'm not disabled when the VA says I am? And one of the things with VA disability is it's saying you can no longer function in the military. And Social Security isn't saying that. And so there's just different standards. It certainly doesn't hurt you. And one thing good about that military is there's usually pretty good records. But even if they've been found unemployable by the VA, that doesn't really track with the Social Security guidelines. So it's kind of a case by case. But I pretty much take when I'm doing screenings and stuff, if it's a VA case, unless they've, you know, they're not getting any treatment or anything like that. Oh, that's one thing I didn't talk about is medical records, school records, that kind of thing. Those are the proof that Social Security uses to show that you're disabled. So you really want to be getting as much treatment as possible. You want to be the perfect patient. You know, if they're referring you for therapies, you want to be going to those therapies, because if it looks like, well, if they just do this, they'd be able to work or they'd be doing better, then you're not going to be approved. So getting really as much treatment as you can and being compliant with that treatment is important. And certain conditions like asthma, the biggest ones tend to be like asthma and seizures. We see seizures a lot. You've got to be approved or get limitations from the seizures. You've got to be compliant with meds. If you're having seizures, but you're not going to the doctor and you're not taking the prescribed meds, your levels are off. They tried one med, it didn't work, and the doctor said you need to do others, and you're like, I don't want a person on that. They won't give you disability. Same with asthma. You've got to be med compliant. You can't just be going to the ERs because you can't breathe, but you're not taking any of those medications.
And I think you just answered this other question. It was what supporting documentation should you be maintaining for the periodic SSDI reviews after your
right.
Yeah,
so yeah, getting that can bite people sometimes, that they get their benefits and they stop their treatment. So whenever a disability examiner approves the case, they set a diary for when it has to be medically reviewed again. Depending on the conditions. It may be 18 months, it may be 3 years, it may be 6 years, whatever. And then they will write to you to get current treatment information, because there has to be, you have to be able to show that the condition continues at the same, it continues, and then it continues to either cause the problems in schools for a child or to be unemployable as an adult. So that ongoing information is important.
Okay, we have time for maybe two more questions. This is from someone that retired in December of 2019 due to a medical reason, and they've been unemployed since. They're 59 years of age. They don't have medical insurance and have not seen a doctor for over a year. So they're inquiring if their medical records would support the disability, even though they're not recent.
It would depend on what the disability was. Um, and they are, I know that they are making some allowances for COVID now. Like even like we would say, you know, you want to be getting, you know, treatment every month and that kind of stuff. They're looking at like phone appointments and that kind of thing. So if it's COVID that's keeping you being seen by the doctor, but you're still on medications or being treated otherwise, um, um, it, you know, there's more allowances now than there used to be. Now, if being a 59-year-old person, basically you've got to have medical conditions that just prevent your past work. They're not going to get into the realm of other work. But that would really, it's really going to depend on what medical conditions are being, that the person has.
Another question, can supporting documents from Social Security be sent and be signed electronically? And do you know if Social Security is doing virtual meetings with applicants?
They're not doing any electronic signatures at this point, but they are allowing some. Like we are primarily doing electronic signatures, but then there's a couple of forms that they require a wet signature on. So what we do is we get those electronic signatures so we can submit the case, and then we send out the wet signatures. But even before, most stuff you dealt with Social Security was by phone. So, but most of it does require a wet signature. They're not using electronic signatures at this point.
Okay. And when you're applying for disability, I think you had answered this too at the beginning, Lisa, but do you also apply for SSI?
It depends on if you're eligible. So you automatically have to do Social Security. Even if you know you don't qualify, they'll send you a technical denial that says, hey, you don't have your quarters. But then the SSI is addition to that. And you only do that if you would also qualify with the limited income and resources.
Okay. We'll do two more questions. And so if you, feel free to stick with us for the next couple of questions. Otherwise, if you have to leave, I want to respect your time, but we're recording this. So we'll send this to you, and you'll get the link and to hear the rest of our presentation here. So just feel free to leave if you need to. If the condition of the applicant is listed in the blue book, does the approval still depend on the severity, and is there a listing of the severity, or who determines this?
Well, it's in the blue book. I mean, but the blue book, it's not just whether the condition is listed, but with almost every condition, there's other criteria that have to be met, like cancer. Depends on the type of cancer, the stage of the cancer, if there's metastasis. Kidney function, it's going to depend on the lab values, so there aren't, besides a few things like Down syndrome and a few things like that, there are very few that just having the diagnosis does it. There's usually some, whether it's additional lab values, pulmonary function studies, if it's a breathing, like COPD. Lots of people have COPD, but it depends on the degree of the COPD as associated with like pulmonary function studies and that kind of thing. But all that stuff is in the blue book.
Okay, awesome. This will be our last question. It's a follow-up question from our veteran. As a 100% veteran and employed, and if Social Security disability does approve the veteran, what is the dollar amount that you cannot exceed monthly?
You can't, so 1263.
1263.
But like I said earlier, if you're making $1,200 a month, the chances of you being approved is very low, because they're going to figure, well, you could push yourself a little harder and make that amount. So 1263 is what is considered this year's substantial gainful activity. That is an absolute, and it's gross, not net. But if you're making pretty close to that, the chances of being approved are pretty low.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, this has been a great information session, Lisa. We are really thankful that you joined us today. Just in closing, we just want to encourage everyone that's listening, if you haven't signed up for the 2020 census, the deadline is September 30th, so just please do that. It's estimated that nearly 40% of Bexar County households still have not responded to the census. So your contribution can last for years, and it really impacts funding for public transportation, roads, healthcare, and education programs. If you could just take a few minutes to do that. I want to thank Lisa again for being a part of our series. We're going to, again, like I said earlier, we're going to send that link to you with the video. And feel free to share that with anyone. We'll send Lisa's PowerPoint, and you'll be able to view this session and previous sessions that we've had webinars on our ARC of San Antonio website. So again, I also thank the Mays Family Foundation for making our series possible.
People can feel free, if they have additional questions or that kind of stuff, to contact me by mail or by phone or email. So a lot of times what we do is just help people know what they need to do to prep for a future application. So we can do that too. It doesn't have to be yeah, I want to sign up today kind of thing. I would also just say, encourage everybody to vote.
Yes, definitely. And that's a nice little plug there for us, Lisa. We're having a session on October 14th on what individuals with disabilities, what their rights are at the polls. So, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be on October 14th. All right. Okay, well, thank you, Lisa. And look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.